Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Roundtable Conversations podcast. I'm one half of your hosting duo, Alec Vicari. Alongside me is my good friend, Harrison Burkhart. HB, how are you?
Hey, I am super good, super stoked. It's been a week since we've done this. I'm excited. I know we got a lot of good feedback, a lot of good traction on the first episode, so I'm super excited to kick off this second episode.
Episode 2. If you were here last episode, our first one, welcome back. We're glad to have you as a follower, as a subscriber, as a listener. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and check out episode 1. We talked about what leadership was. We actually went into the importance of success and failure. Today, Harrison, we're going to talk about some actually significant topics in the realm of leadership, and more specifically, the types of leadership that we come across within the work center. And then we're going to actually touch on arguably the most important and critical component of leadership and having that connection with your peers and your subordinates. But before we get to that, our listeners, we ask that you like, subscribe, and comment below. Tell us what you want to see. Tell us what you think. If you want to be a part of the podcast, by all means, email us. Let us know. We'll get you on. And of course, just follow us along this journey. We got big things. We're working on a lot of topics. We got a lot of great guests coming in, and we're just really excited for what's next. HB, you ready to kick this off?
Let's do it. I'm super stoked for this topic too. I think it's going to be fun. The transactional versus transformational leadership, styles.
I'll begin, brother. So transactional versus transformational. I think that's arguably one of the two of the most common leadership styles that you will see in your work center. And they're actually quite contradicting or competitive to one another. Now they both do hold their strengths and weaknesses, I believe, and we're actually going to touch base on each of them. So we'll start with transactional, and with transactional leadership, HB, I think really what it comes down to is an active or a passive management exception. And what I mean by that is with that active management, you have that leader that comes into the work center. They have their subordinates, they have their mission, they have their objectives, and they're actually looking for faulty deficiencies, errors, mistakes, and not meeting that standard maybe that's set. What do you think about that?
When I think about transactional, I think about you do something for me, you get something in return, right? So just think about it as a store. You go into a store, you go to the checkout, you buy, you put your money down, and then you get something back in return, right? That's a monetary, materialistic thing, and that works. But when it comes to people and the human element, give and take sometimes isn't the same. And not only that, is when you talk about returns and those rewards, they might be different for everybody, So it could be transactional. I would imagine it being you're connecting in a very artificial way. Somebody's got something for you and you give it back, but I think in that level, it's got to be hand in hand. It's got to be 50-50. It's not always going to be 50-50, but transactional that commitment level isn't as high. It's only like, hey, if you do this, you get that in return.
And I think you touched on that reward and punishment. I think I got ahead of myself and kind of talking about two different types of transactions you have, but you mentioned it with that transactional leadership. You don't really have that buy-in. You don't have that investment of that fellow leader or subordinate that we really talked about last episode, but rather you're focused on that product rather than the product capability. And through that, to meet that mission requirement, to meet that standard, you do focus on the reward and punishment. And so with that active management by exception, you're constantly on the lookout, right? You're actually interfering with your workers. You're actually interfering with your subordinates, and you're limiting that empowerment that you offer them in the workplace. HB, what do you think in terms of active management by exception? What are the limiting factors that you now propose on your personnel and detrimental consequences that come with that?
That's tricky. I do think, you have to really be conscious and aware of what the transaction is. Like, are you fully understanding what that member is wanting from it? Because not everyone's in this for awards. Not everyone's in it for the next stripe, right? Some people are in it just for growth or just to get by. So I think you can create a lot of barriers and obstacles for yourself if you don't find what that person truly is going and setting out forth. And then, as you said, with the discipline, you might be giving that person that discipline for something that you just want. You want that transactional, hey, if you do this, I'm going to get an award out of it. If you do this, I'm going to look good. But is that truly what that member wants? And those disciplinary factors are going to come from false, premises and not something that necessarily that member truly wants. That transaction isn't something that, that wants. And that goes back to the buy-in. You are not establishing any kind of buy-in. First of all, there wasn't a buy-in because you haven't really found what that transactional piece could be. So it's a tough one. I think transactional leadership and the disciplinary, boundary is it's not a good one for me personally. I think transactional, it has to be 50-50. Like, hey, you're going to go to this event. I'm going to this event. We're both getting something out of it. Hey, you're going to the 5-6. I'm going to the 5-6. We're both getting something out of it. Sometimes it goes, left and right depending, but you don't win many battles if everything is transactional.
And I think when you as an individual become a new leader, a new supervisor, and I think that what we commonly see in our workplace is that transactional leadership can arguably be one of the most common ways of expressing that leadership when you're new in that position, right? Because having that active management, right, you want to make sure that the people you are now responsible for meet those standards, and that could actually come from a very genuine place of you're committed to them, so you expect excellence and you expect success because you want the best, or it could come from a place of your own success and your own reward, and you don't want them to make a mistake because then it may reflect badly on you. So I think it can come from multiple perspectives or approaches, but I think it's the most common one you see. You see senior airman. Now he has 2 A1Cs, 3 A1Cs. They were possibly peers before. Maybe they weren't. But now he wants to make sure that they do the job correctly. Because if they don't, those consequences he may have to answer for.
I guess if you look at it too, like in the simplest of forms, PT test, if you get 100, hopefully, your commander honors that and you get that. What do you get in return? The transaction, you get hopefully a comp day or a gold day or whatever that may be. You pass your CDCs a little quicker, you might get recognized, a little more, and then that might lead to maybe some BTZ packages or some 1206s, So it's at that simple form, and I think it's almost like a given. So truthfully, that's why for me, it doesn't embellish what leadership is. It's just something that's there, and it's a guideline to follow, and it's really simple. It's like, hey, this is what the book says. This is what the basic standard is. Let's just go with this because that's kind of, the way we have to do things. But when we get into that transformational level, then you're truly, all right, I know you got to get this PT test done, and you need to pass it, right? But what am I doing to find something in you that you truly love that's going to transform you into actually loving PT? Maybe it's swimming. Maybe it's not going out to the track and just running, because that's, again, transactional. We got to go out to the track. But what about taking that extra time to transform that person and finding what they truthfully love? And then it instills a passion in them that they truly want to work out, they truly want to learn, and not just pass their CDCs. So there's a huge difference between the two. And this leads us to that transformational leadership.
But before we get there, I would like to say that I think the real world application of a PT test, right? Something that may come around once a year, something that may come around twice a year, but it's actually a real current topic that's always revolving in the Air Force, right? It's always and really a topic for discussion as a supervisor, as a leader. But that actually shows what passive and active management look like within that leadership role as a transactional leader. And what I mean by that is if you have that active management, you're trying to get your guy to do the push-ups. You're trying to get them to do the sit-ups because you're concerned about what their score may be. And if they do fail, or maybe if they don't hit a passing score that maybe your leadership wants, you are now facing and fearful of the consequences. So that would be that active management. But then that passive management would be you're not concerned with their health, you're not concerned with their fitness, and you don't monitor that, right? You don't see how they're doing. You're not invested in them. And then when that PT test does come around and they do have a low score or they don't meet the standard, now you have those consequences. And now that's where you express that punishment to meet that standard. And they both really have those consequences that follow. But as you touched on, that transactional leader, they're focused on the outcome, but they're not focused on the transformation. They're not invested in their people. And in that transactional leadership, it actually catalyzes growth. It doesn't inspire and root something that can make them extremely better.
You said a word and it makes me think about this, and it's kind of like the definition of the two, right? Is when we talk about punishment versus discipline, right? So transactional would be way more on that not discipline, the punishment side, and then transformational would be discipline, because you have to look within yourself to be disciplined and make those transformations. Whereas punishment, that's hey, you do this, you get that. You do this, you get that. That's it. So it's pretty clear cut in that sense.
With transactional leadership, HB, do you think there's any actual positives that can come out of transactional leadership?
I think initially, like when you're first forming maybe teams, you're like in the crawl phase of things, like you're getting that like hamster on the wheel and like dangling that carrot, but it doesn't sustain very long. It's kind of something that like, hey, let's kind of get off the ground running. But once like time goes on and that hamster gets tired, they're going to get tired of that same stuff, and they're going to need to experience that transformational leadership where now the treadmill isn't a treadmill. They can like maybe grow some wings and start flying around. People get tired of running on that same track and being on that same track. And that's what I think transactional is. It's literally clear cut. You get something, I give you something. And of course it's not a bad thing all the time, but I think it's very basic and minimum, if that makes sense.
Basic and minimum. It maybe I do think there is a time and place for it, right? Because I think one of the positive that transactional leadership does is it does set that standard. And maybe as NCOs, maybe as leaders within our work center, we have to ask ourselves, have I ever set a standard for my peers? Have I ever set a standard for those below me? Because if I haven't, how do they know that they're succeeding? How do they know that they're growing or developing? I think that's actually a huge area that we may miss on and never target until it's too late, until maybe that final feedback or that EPR comes around, and you haven't consistently provided that feedback of the standard you were meant to establish. So I think there is power in having that standard and making it evident in the workplace. But another thing I think is great, and I kind of just touched on it does provide that feedback. So I think as leaders, we can sometimes really fault at one setting that standard. And then maybe when that standard isn't met, or maybe your personnel are on a trajectory to the opposite direction that you need them, we have a hard time creating that feedback. We have a hard time sitting them down and kind of going over the strengths and weaknesses based on in fear of how they may perceive the message or how it may possibly tarnish the relationship. But I think that fear comes from the wrong perception of what feedback does. We're concerned with possibly too much of hurt feelings or emotions rather than, hey, maybe we need to break through certain barriers that are difficult to go beyond where we're at now.
I think that like you're right here with the feedback, perfect opportunity for this. And I think the transactional is kind of like the initial beginning phase, hey, you got your initial feedback. Let's set those standards and expectations. You got to do this to get this. Midterm, you've done this. Now you've got to work towards this to get to that. Now, transformational, again, would be that second phase of let's now day to day, what's this person really doing and what's this person striving for? That feedback form, let's put it to the side for a second and let's really see that growth. So they do kind of go hand in hand and they bridge together. But I think if you're not tying them together, setting those standards and investing more in trying to get onto that more commitment level of transformational leadership, it doesn't work out too well. Because again, if you don't have that transactional leadership in the beginning and you don't set those standards, you probably won't be able to have that transformational leadership leverage, right? Because there is no expectations, there are no standards, there's no guidance. So initially, for sure, and then you bring in that transformational, and there's a little mix of both. But I would still say that transactional is kind of like your foundation, your framework, and like the starting point of building into that transformational leader.
And so going into transformational leadership, what do you think transformational leadership or how does it differ from that transactional?
I would say transformational is you're truly getting that person to buy into who you are as a person and have that personal commitment to you. And from that, hopefully, as they formulate themselves, they're not anymore a follower. So a follower, let's say, you need to be a follower, but then they can formulate their own definition of what leadership is and transform in a way that through your show of influence, commitment, that they can write their own book, write their own chapter, and be their own leader and develop into their own strong self.
I love what you said on developing as a leader, right? Because that's the ultimate goal when you have that supervision on someone, right? Or you're in charge of a work center, is we all start as followers, and I think we all always embody that, right? I think the greatest teacher is the best student. But our ultimate goal is to actually create new leaders, to bring them up, right? Each one teach one. And so with that transformational leadership, I think the focal point in the beginning is to have a common goal. And that common goal should be the mission, but also the investment as a team. I want you part of mine. How can I be a part of yours? And then you align and you transcend. So establishing that common goal through understanding one another's inspirations, aspirations, personal goals, professional goals, and they intertwine. And through that development, through that experience and time, through that feedback, through those standards, you do create a new leader. You empower, you build, you innovate, you self-reflect. With transformational leadership, there is actually 4 different realms of transformational leadership. And I'd love to discuss them if you wanted to.
Well, you got it. Let's go for it.
So transformational leadership, that's my thing, man, right? Buying into our people, right? I'm a true I believe firmly that the mission will always exist, right? The mission will always be there, right? Whether you go home at 8:00 at night when the duty day ended at 4:30, or you go right when that clock hits, the mission will be there in the morning, right? But investing in your people, investing in their capability, individually and professionally, I think that is the most prominent thing, and that will ensure the success of the mission. And so with that transformational leadership, you have the 4 components, and what they are is that intellectual, that idealized, that individual, and then that inspirational realms. And then with that intellectual, just to begin with, right? What stems from that is sitting down with your person, again, understanding where their vision is, understanding where maybe their standard is at, or where they believe their potential capacity is, and just feeding that, like planting the seeds and rooting the growth in the knowledge. And so with that intellectual stimulation, providing that knowledge, providing that pathway forward, what do you think that the benefit is for that?
I think again that capturing that's what just investing in people. I think that's the probably most significant leadership tactic is investing in people, because at the end of the day, let's just say any tier group, right? As a leader, we are trying to build and bring people up to hopefully surpass where we're at, which is that transformational level. I think people often, more often than not, struggle from the transactional phase, and then they, fear and trust and all those other things, culture, they had a lack of empowerment, and they're just struggling they can't give that back if they never got it, you know? So we talk about this all the time is like, hey, I'm I'm hoping that these people up here at the senior NCO level reach down and pull me up with them. But when do I start reaching up? When do I start asking for help? When do I start thinking to myself, hey, I can grow and I can learn these things. Everything's wide open and out there. But again, it starts with my own identity first. And like you're saying, that intellectual level of where am I at, definition of a leader to me. And then it leads into those second, third, and fourth level of the transformational leadership.
And so with that second level, you go into that individual consideration. I mean, really what that is that recognition of that individual's contribution. And I think not only contribution in terms of outcome, product, capability, but like their diversity, who they are, their individuality. And I think when you recognize that, not only do you empower in them that they're and instill in them that they are actually contributing, that they are meeting that standard, and that they're capable. But you bring them into that team, right? You emphasize their importance, and I think that again, that is one thing that we really lack on is really just continuously recognizing our people, right? We're so it's so easy to be passive in these successes, and the overcome obstacles of our people, right? Because that's what we expect. Because we do set that high standard, right? That's what we do. That's what we expect, and that's how we grow. But if you don't take the time to sit back or press that pause button, and you know, good job, or let's go over how you did that, or hey, tell me how you got to that solution, and actually recognizing and actually really buying in on what they did or who they're becoming or where we're at from where we started, I think that just does leaps and bounds for where you go next.
I think that like what you're saying right now is bringing somebody and making them feel like they're a part of the team. And we get this, I think, common misconception of you're not on the team because you're an airman. You're not on the team because you're a senior airman. You're not on the team because you're a tech sergeant, but you're in a different AFSC. That's so false. I feel like, again, you can get those ideas, but you have to ask for them and then be okay and willing to listen to them and then empower those people to say, that was a good idea. Let's push this. Let's think about this. Let's go further into it and build on it. Let's have a meeting where we all talk about what we need to do to go forward together instead of just, hey, I'm going to say this and you do it. Back to that transactional level, it's more of a, let's do this together. What's our best, feature skills that we can bring to the team and not worry about the other things of, hey, if I do this, I'm going to get rewarded with that.
I like the emphasis on the what can statement, right? What can we do? How do we move forward, or what is possible? And the reason I mentioned that and I emphasize that is the next component of transformational leadership being that inspirational motivation. And how I tie that what can statement is when you get that new subordinate, when you get that new airman underneath you, right? And your job is to now refine their skills and help pave that way forward. I think a lot of times what you'll learn is that these young airmen or these young individuals, they have energy, right? They have motivation, but they don't really have that compass of where to next or how to. And if through that inspiration and that motivation, I think what is important for us is to expand their perspective, to expand that lens that they see out of, right? Because maybe they only see steps 1, 2, but that true growth and that true expansion of character is passed to 3 and 4. And when you get stuck in that realm of just standards, when you get stuck in that realm of just product, going back to that transactional leadership, I think that's you lose focus of the bigger picture or the potentials that lie. And it goes back to refining or emphasizing their diversity and in their unique abilities, in their drastic differences in character and just what they bring to the table. but then also showing them what can our team do for you as we welcome you in and see what you can do for us.
I would add on to this because I think it's a prime targeting time here is influence, and what language we convey. Because I hear it all the time, and more often than not is, hey, you're reblued, you're reblued. What is rebluing? What does that mean? If you think about that, the core of that, you have gone to ALS and actually learned about your job, and you've came back now more knowledgeable about your job. Like, that's such a wrong thing. That is the standard, right? Or what do we say all the time? I can't wait to get out. I can't wait to retire. What is that breeding into the culture of these young airmen? The influence we do. So if I'm just setting the standard and checking the boxes of like, I come into work, I meets all requirements and criterias, how would I expect in the culture and environment and the climate that I'm influencing for anyone to achieve and aspire to be greater? So it starts with us. It starts with, what am I doing? How am I bettering myself? How am I transforming myself in those pillars of resiliency, those pillars of just individuality? And then how is that trickling down? Because people are watching. We're the number one, being viewed as those leaders, right? So if we're not doing it, why would we expect other people, and especially the airmen, to do it? And then we turn around and we say, nah, these guys are lazy. They're not doing anything. Why don't we start looking into ourselves and asking ourselves, why am I not doing it first and showing and leading the way, right? Being that influential difference in this culture.
I hate the statement of you're reblued, right? Because it's as if like that verbiage, that blue, is you are now an embodiment or a reflection of what the Air Force wants you to be as a leader, as an NCO. And it's kind of like that it's kind of that just indirect just bash on someone, as
It's
if
like a teacher's pet. Like, oh, you're the teacher's pet. Why? Because you get good grades? Like, aren't we supposed to be getting good grades? Aren't we supposed to be learning?
And you're right. And so I think a lot of people maybe mock or just kind of undervalue like the actual image that the Air Force the organization wants from their leaders, right? And that is that transformational leadership. That is that individual that exceeds the standard in excellence in all we do, right? And I know these are quotes, these are statements, these are concepts, but if you actually buy into those, if you embody them, you can actually see the growth of yourself in those all around you. And so you're right. It's interesting how we make a joke of the reference to you've been reblued when someone is now reflecting and embodying the principles that we are all instilled day one at BMT. And as you said, that kind of goes into we need to be that blue. We need to be that role model, and that's what that idealized influence is if I want my followers to become leaders, I'm the teacher. They're the student at this time. And I not only do I want them to be where I'm at, but I want them to be past me. Don't be like me, be better than me. But you have to have those foundational principles. And you have to have that reflection of what the Air Force wants or your organization, whether military or civilian side. You have to have that embodiment. You have to have those principles that rely and are dependent on integrity, and they don't wave left or right. You're solidified. And that's how you root the development and the growth of your people.
I think, let me add to this and then we'll move to the next section. Cause I think so when I think about it, I think about, the human element, right? We are lazy by nature. And then when people do tell us like, hey, you're a go-getter. Hey, you're reading these books. Like, what a this and that. You're reblued, this and that. Now it takes somebody else. It takes somebody who has values and who has a vision to know why they're doing it and what they're doing it for. Because somebody could easily get into your mind. So you have to be that mental toughness has to be there, because at the end of the day, if you're going to say like, hey, you reblued, or you're such an Air Force this, or you're such an Air Force that, I mean, it is what it is. You're right. I am. I love learning. I love giving back to other people. We can't falter. We can't let other people get into our minds and tell us to go back to that transactional level. We have to identify in ourselves what we want and who we want to become to lead by influence and example at that transformational level.
I think we lost you there for a minute, HB. It kind of froze out for a minute. I don't know if you saw that glitch. Did you see that?
No.
Yeah,
How dare this computer? Because I was on a tear, I thought.
You were.
Yeah.
I thought I lost you for a minute, but I think we're good. And we'll move on in a minute. But you talked about we have that natural humanistic aspect to be comfortable, to do the less resistant route. And I think that is a great introduction to a topic we'll discuss at a later episode. And that's the difference between motivation and discipline, and how that discipline is actually one of the most critical underlining aspects of being a great leader. But for another day, right?
Yeah.
So before we get into our next topic, HB, tell everyone about our great sponsor, Malmstrom Air Force Base 5-6 Alliance.
We got the Malmstrom Air Force Base 5-6 Alliance. We just had a meeting, 23 June. We had a great showing, 30 plus individuals. It was just overwhelming to see that. Chief Master Sergeant Joseph Casey came out. He gave a really good panel to the NCOs who were in the room. A couple senior airmen. It was really cool to see that. Lisa Saab came out and talked about the new adoptive school program we've been pitching out. The biggest takeaway from that was, and I love this, is what your leadership pushes to you as a leader. Don't question and undermine that to your subordinates, to your peers. Follow through with the mission. And if you have issues, go back to that leader, go back to that, person, and have a crucial conversation with them about why you have those thoughts and feelings. Don't stray away from that leader, because it will show weakness in your leadership abilities. So with that being said, 21 July is our next 5-6 meeting at the Grizzly Bend. We're looking to focus on what ideas everyone can bring and just keep collaborating and growing together.
And for everyone that may have that question of, well, what is the 5-6, or what can the 5-6 do for me? Really, it's that platform, right? It's that platform to take leaders within different AFSCs, different organizations that have unique perspectives and strengths, and we integrate, right? We transcend, we become interdependent. And so we want you part of our team, right? And we want to offer you our strengths and embody yours, and together we move forward. So see you at the meeting. On to the next topic, HB. We got trust in the workplace.
In the workplace.
And I know, man, this is your bread and butter. And I know you're excited to talk about this, brother. But
yes, ma'am.
before I let you go on a spree here, you mind if I read a definition that I think really just kind of embodies and brings a unique perspective to what trust is?
Let's go.
So it says, trust is the belief that others act in the interest of fairness and social welfare rather than their own self-interest. And what I really take from that, and what I think is really great and unique about that, is trust really comes down to me being invested and focused on you, in your treatment, in your capability, in your accentuating circumstances, rather than mine. It's that I put you first, and together we move forward. What do you think?
Man, that is, perfect to what I was honestly just wanting to go into, because we often, more than not, we don't even raise the question of what can I do to build more trust in our relationship? Asking that simple question to a peer, to your supervisor, to an airman, to somebody in your sphere of influence. We always, we never think about trust, but that is literally the most significant thing. My word is my bond. Trust. The simple things like, hey, I noticed something on your uniform, right? Let me pull you to the side and let you know what's going on and explain why. I call these things trust keys. Those little things, going out of your way to get these keys and form trust with people, and it eventually unlocks the heart. And how that happens is with that trust building and building, it bridges that gap and closes it to a more deeper connection between two people. The more trust keys you have, the bigger the hearts you unlock and combine, and the more unified you can be together. But if there is no trust, which it can be fractured and broken very easily, it takes a long time to rebuild, and sometimes you won't get it back. So again, right off the gates, it should be our job as leaders to not only build trust, but to be advocates of trust and looking to deepen the levels of trust throughout our sphere of influence.
And so I ask, I asked the question, the indirect question of, can we even be a leader if we don't establish trust within our work center or within that person we're responsible for, right? Because you as the leader, you as the individual, you can have as many strengths as we can mention, right? You can have that tool set, you can have that way forward, and you can guarantee success. But if your character doesn't make that connection with the person you're responsible for, if they don't believe in your genuineness, in your care, in your investment, in your word, then you go nowhere, right? And so in the beginning of the episode, we mentioned that trust is the foundational aspect of leadership. It's the foundation of all relationships, whether personal, professional, with our peers, with our families, with our significant ones. That trust is what really allows you to believe in taking that next step with them. It's what it makes you feel confident and empowered and strong and resilient with them by your side, right? We talk about being a team, that we're each other's partners, right? We go to war with each other. We face those obstacles. We break those barriers. But if that trust, that foundation has cracks in it, or that foundation isn't built on solid rock, then it's easy to crumble. It's easy to break. And as you said, once you do break through that, once you do penetrate that foundation, it's very hard to come back from the surface. It's very hard.
I would say with that is, without trust, you're just a title, And a big thing with that is, this is one thing that I think we should all think about, is what level of trust do you have with those in your influence? Are they comfortable with having those crucial conversations with you? Because if they're not, and there's complacency, then that trust level might not be as high as you think it is. You and I, Alec, we could talk about, the flaws that you and I have, right? And at the end of the day, we always joke like, hey, I was just giving you a hard time. But I trust you, man. I trust 100% that you're telling me these things because you want the best in me. And when we talk to our folks in those spheres of influence, they need to be aware that is why we're doing it. And if we are not doing it for those reasons, the truth comes out in the wash, and they will find that out. Again, if you are not an advocate of trust, you are just a title. And it's unfortunate, but it's a reality.
And I think it's important for our listeners to understand that there is no recipe, there is no equation, there's no 1 + 2 = 3 when it comes to trust, right? It's going to be based on your relationship with those you're responsible for, built on your relationship with your peers, and even those in higher positions, right? Those relationships are going to be unique, complex, and different. And so with that, it really comes down to your character and your underlining values and principles, and you staying true and you practicing that integrity is what will develop that trust. It's about being authentic. It's about being who you are and sticking with that, and confiding in one another and investing in one another. Again, it goes back to that fairness and that investment, that value, that buy-in into you.
You know what? It's interesting because sometimes I don't think we often realize and think about like the little things we do or forget to do, the things we forget to say. It can fracture that trust. If I don't give you feedback, if I don't acknowledge you, if I don't show gratitude or appreciation, if I undermine myself, if I question my abilities, if I question your abilities, the list is extremely lengthy. If I gossip, if you hear me gossiping about somebody else, how quick are you going to be to come and talk to me about a situation that's just happened with you? The list goes for days. And that's why we have to be so cognizant and aware and self-reflecting, and then asking those questions. Hey, am I doing something that isn't trustworthy? Am I acting of not advocate of trust? What can I do to be better? I want to be someone that you trust. What can I do to be that person? It's an inward reflection. And again, we look at it like they need to trust me. That is so wrong. Just like respect. I've got to earn your trust just like I've got to earn your respect. Doesn't go, hey, because I'm an NCO, you should respect me. Because I'm an NCO, you should trust me. It's the complete opposite. Because you're an NCO, you should be building that trust. Because you're an NCO, you should be earning their respect. So it's something I'm deeply passionate about, because I feel like, as you know, people just don't take that time. And for me, it's not simple because it takes that time and it takes that effort. But then again, it goes back to that transformational aspect. Are you committed to your people? Are you growing and developing your people? Are you starting with yourself?
And I want to ask the question to our listeners is take a moment to self-reflect and ask yourself, like, have you taken the time to value the trust within the relationships you have within your work center? Have you actually taken the time and ask yourself, between me and my peers, between my subordinates, do we have that trust? Have you even considered that? Because I think we're so quick to start with that transactional of here's the standards, here's the way forward, here's what the focus is, right? And then maybe we even go into the transformational of how can I invest in you and how do we expand? But have we asked, or have we even looked at the fact of why would this person even believe in me? Why would this person believe in the words I say or the actions that I'm committed to? What have I done to root that seed so we can move forward together? And we just so easily can overpass, like you said, that complex and difficult and strenuous but devoted time necessary to build that trust, to have that buy-in. And so everything we talk about on this podcast, everything that we as leaders embody and we value, without that trust, you go nowhere.
It just came to my mind, and I think this is so relatable and crucial to this, because it's something I've never done, and I want to start doing, right? Is think about this in your life, in my life. How many times have we been in relationships or through life experienced fracturing of trust? How many relationships have we been in that have been untrustworthy, right? So what about the people in our sphere of influence? How do we know what they've been through in their lives without finding out on that personal level what their trust looks like? What does trust look like to you? What is trust? What's your definition of trust? What have you experienced in the realm of trust? And before I even, go further and just think, hey, this person's going to trust me right off the gate. Yay, why not ask and discover and experience and be a little empathetic about what that person has gone through and understand it, because it might take some time to work on it. But again, if you don't discover and take that time to do it, you are wrong, and that's going to show, and it's going to be evidently true. And you could probably relate to the people that they had those bad experiences with. And again, how would that be? How would that fall into that transformational leadership as what we are trying to aspire to be?
And I think it's important to know that trust in a relationship, trust as a leader, it's not a one-way road, right? It's not I need to only gain my subordinates or my subordinates trust for what I believe in, but I need to trust in them as well. I need to trust in their capability, in their intentions, in their way forward, right? Because second guessing those around you's actions or intentions or their meanings, that can really make a relationship deteriorate. So I challenge all of you listening is when you get back to your work center, when you get around your peers, your subordinates, and just your organization, let your people know, I trust you. And maybe ask that question of, or do you trust me? And I think that might open up a really strong and expansive conversation that maybe has never been had before. But when it's over, it's actually laid the groundwork for something incredible.
You know what? This has sparked this thought in my head is, do you think those transactional leaders are so fearful of those members breaking trust, or not breaking trust, but because they have issues of trust, these transactional leaders, they can't trust their people and they are doing the right things? And then again, that commitment, they're just making it even worse in that situation. But those who are transformational, they know their people are going to do it because they've influenced them to be the people of trust. They've shown them what trust is. They have instilled trust into the work environment. So why would I need to worry about it? Because I know they're going to get the mission done. But at the end of the day, on the other end of the spectrum, those people who haven't found trust within themselves, unfortunately, they're going to be looking for other people to say, you know what? I don't trust you because I can't trust myself. It's an endless spiral. So unless we, again, look within ourselves and say, hey, I can trust myself. I've gone past this, and I definitely need to trust my people, and just create that safe environment.
And you pose the question of, does transactional leadership have that trust, right? Because it's so focused on reward and punishment. It's so focused on standard and outcome. And I would say that with that active management, you don't have that trust, right? Because you are so focused on observing the process, observing each step, because you don't believe in what their capability is. So you feel as if you need to have that oversight. You need to be able to jump in on the whim, correct the deviation, and move forward. Right. So there is no trust in your individual's capability, which then begs the question of what have you done to instill proper alignment and ability within them? Have you trained? Have you empowered? Have you educated? And then
Yes.
when you go into that passive management, I think there's no truth there either, right? Because maybe I leave you to your process. I let you do your thing. I quote unquote empower you, and you fall short, or you make a mistake, or maybe your expectation or understanding of the standard I gave you was misinterpreted. That passive management now comes down and they lay the hammer on you, right? Now they're focused on the consequences. Now they're focused on the outcome, and it's a little bit of a blame game, or there is no real feedback or lesson learned, right? But if you had that trust, then you would understand that we all have missteps, right? We talked about last week. Those failures are what lead to success. So if you had that trust, you would go to that individual and you would ask the questions of, what went wrong, or what was your process, or what could we do differently, rather than focused on consequences and just and yeah, really just pointing the finger and playing that blame game.
And it goes back to that transactional level. I know I'm going to get this done, whatever. I'm not going to go ask for help because I don't know. I'm just going to get it done. That transformational level is, I can trust this individual to guide me, to mentor me, to get to where I need to be to grow. Versus, I can't trust this person. It's just a transactional relationship. Why would I even go? I just have to get it done to get this little reward, or this, check this box. Why would I go over there? It's not like that person trusts me, and what's the point? So it's a very interesting, like, that development and how it can, like, lead to certain things. But I don't know, for me it's such a different level. It's a different level of leadership. It's a massive jump, if that makes sense.
And so, talking about trust in the work center, we talk about trust, but there's actually a triangle of trust that I would really kind of love to discuss with you, HB. And within that triangle of trust, you have three levels of
Mm.
trust within the workplace, and it starts with that institutional trust, and then it moves forward into that trust over time, and then you get that final stage, which we all strive for as leaders, is that personal trust. So, kind of starting from the bottom with that institutional trust. HB, what is that? How does it start? And how do we operate within that realm?
I would kind of, I'm trying to lay this down into like the most understanding way, right? So it's kind of like, for me, it'd be that authoritative, like, hey, you're in this position, so because you're in this position, I have to trust you. Because you're a NCOIC, because you're a flight chief, because you have a title, I should trust you. The institutional, the bare basic minimum level, it's kind of a access granted. It's a mutual, hey, let's just trust each other right off the gate kind of thing, because you're in a position that entitles you to trust, is what I would look at as the institutional level. And it's not very significant because there's no commitment truly to that individual. It's just you're in a place of authority, so I guess I'll trust you.
And I think when I think of that institutional trust, I think of everyone's first day on the job, right? The first time you maybe entered your squadron, the first time you you entered the workplace, maybe as security forces as I am, right? The first time you worked that gate, you had that partner with you, right? You had that individual that was showing you in the ins and outs, that were introducing you to who, and maybe was even giving you that the early gossip of the workplace, right? Regardless of it, you trusted in that individual. You believed that they knew more, that they were educated, and they wanted the best for you. It's your first day, right? You're a novice. And so I look at that, and you have that automatic, or that that automated foundation of trust. And we use the term trust. It's you're confiding in that individual to believe that they are showing you the right way. And so we don't want to stay there for long, right? Because it is that institutional. It's that bare minimal. It's that acceptance into the workplace. But the significance of the institutional trust is that it actually opens the doors. It opens the doors for more. It opens the doors for connection, and it opens for the doors for that transcending empowerment and interpersonal relations that we discuss. And so with that institutional trust, you then move into that truth over time. So HB, what do you got for me?
You go first on this one. I'm curious to hear you first.
I think with truth over time, I think that's you go into that institutional trust, and you have that those initial relationships. Then you get to interact, and you start creating those relationships, and they grow. And I think that truth over time is really culminated through engagement. It's culminated through those conversations, understanding each other, learning about one another, and then through experiences, those success and failures, those lessons learned, those ups and downs, those challenges, those helping hands. And that comes from your leaders, that comes from your peers. And so kind of embodying the components and the concepts that we have talked about, investing in your individuals, caring about that individual, buying into their character. I think those components create that collaboration, kind of move into that transformational leadership, and that builds that institutional trust to that truth over time. And from there, that's where you start to get that investment, right? You start getting those dividends within that truth over time. Now you are on the same team. Now you're moving forward. Now you have that shared common goal.
You know what's interesting about this, and that's why I wanted you to go first with truth over time, is because how much time does it take, right, to get to that personal commitment level of trust? And what it makes me think of is, are you asking the right questions and going out of your way to speed up the process to get to that commitment level? And again, it's different from everybody. Like, you and I, could take us 4 days. You and Joe Schmo, it could take you 45 days. But if your effort isn't there and truth over time isn't established, and you're not asking the right questions and going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and having vulnerability to let that person know who you are, they're not going to trust you very soon. So truth over time, I mean, you could go a whole lifespan, just kind of sitting at that level. But until you hit that tipping point of, hey, let me start asking the right questions, and let me start investing in that person and committing to what lies beneath the surface, and giving them what lies beneath the surface in me is when they're going to be truly committed to me, not just because of a position or title on leadership or that institutional. Even I can attribute that to your family. You were born into a family, right? Truth over time. So you're with your family until you're 18 years old, but your mom and dad don't care about you. They don't love you, right? So truth over time is going to still be there. But are you going to get that personal level if mom and dad didn't love you? If mom and dad never took the time to get to know you, they forced you into different programs. It just goes back into NCO. Truth over time, you could be somebody's supervisor for 4, 5, 6 years. But what did you genuinely do with that time? Did you fracture the trust? Or did you just kind of sustain a relationship as that institutional level? So I think it's a choice, and I think it's something that you need to work on. And it's something that unless you truly invest and give yourself the time to be vulnerable and allow the other person to be vulnerable, you will never hit the level of commitment. And I mean, I think you could hit it really quick if you worked on it and you gave it your all and you were truly committed to building trust in that relationship, and the other person understood that because you were communicative about it and said, this is what I'm trying to get to with you. I want to be that person. You can tell me anything. I want to be that person that if you need to come cry, if you need to come tell me a story, if you're upset, if you're super excited, let's go. Bring it on, you know? But again, within ourselves, what barriers do we have up and what do we want? Because that's another thing. Sometimes in ourselves, we don't want to get past that institutional level. Trust over time is something that just happens. And personal commitment is a deeper choice.
And so you mentioned asking the question, right? Are we asking the questions? And I think that really connects with what we talked about earlier is having that what can statement. What can we do? Where can we go next? Having those questions and opening up that lens and that perspective is actually where you get from truth over time to that personal trust. And it goes back to what we discussed with really what trust is. And that's genuineness, character, and investment in those around you and the ones to your left and to your right. So we got the pyramid, right? We got the trust pyramid. We got the foundational aspect of leadership. And so with that, HB, we come to our closing remarks. I think it's been a great episode, man.
Yeah.
I'm super happy that you shaved the mustache. I haven't really had to look at it this whole time. So for our listeners, thank you for joining us. Please email us at roundtableconvos@gmail.com. Ask questions. If you want to be on the podcast, please let us know. If you guys want to hear certain topics, we're ready and willing. And again, I think HB and I are both very excited for what's next. We do have a list of guests that want to come on, so we're going to be pushing that out pretty soon. Subscribe, like, comment, and we look forward to seeing you next week. HB, you got anything for me?
No, it's always awesome. It's always a pleasure. The guest list is pretty extensive, I would say. It's pretty I would have never thought, we're 1-2 episodes in and we could get some of the names that we've gotten. So with it, exactly what you said, if y'all out there that are listening have any kind of connections or you'd like to see somebody, you can put us in contact with somebody that might want to come in, please do so. Please email this email down here below and hook us up. But thank you guys so much.
All right, my leaders. Each one teach one. Aim high.